Well, hello, everybody. Again, Mark Helsel here with Truth in Youth podcast. And we're making history here today because this is literally the first podcast we've ever done. And it would be totally, I would never want to start a podcast like this without starting it with a person that I would say was the beginning of an amazing career for me, actually, and that would be my son, Christian Helsel. He's joining us today for the first podcast ever. So, Christian, I'm gonna give you a little introduction here, but I wanted to say hi to start this off.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. But for our listeners, obviously, I know you extremely well. You're my son. But for our listeners, I just jotted down a few things kind of to set the tone for this podcast because we're going to share a lot of information about your career. And, I called it from T-ball to pro ball. And I just want to set the stage here as an introduction for our listeners. From a youngest age, as I can remember, you were a kid that absolutely loved sports. As a personality, I always thought, wow, this is a kid that can manage adversity. And we're going to talk a lot about adversity today because I kind of call you a flatliner. And I want to get into that today of how you manage that, because some people really, they have high highs and low lows, and you've been always able to manage things well. From the earliest ages, you were a strong competitor. You loved to compete. I also, and I know it's going to sound like I'm bragging as a dad, but one thing I look back on your career, and we're going to talk about it today, and you were always a great teammate. Everybody that played with you loved to play with you. And that was fun for me as a coach to see that. You obviously had an incredible work ethic. Many, many times I'd see you working on your own, doing all these things, very self-motivated. And the last one, and some people take this the wrong way, I would call you an overachiever. I think you actually, despite all your talents, I think you even got more out of your talents than a lot of people would have. So, I mean, those are the things for our listeners that I would say are the foundation of who you are. So it's great to have you here, Christian. So give us a little update on where you are today and what you're doing, and then we're going to get into some really good material.
Well, first off, based on my goals and aspirations, I may consider myself an underachiever, but I guess that just makes me delusional.
I forgot humility. That was a big one too. And there's the first humble thing you had to say today.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, yeah. So, thank you for the introduction. I'd say you're fairly accurate on all of that. And, at this point in my life, I'm done playing baseball. I'm 29 years old. My last year of lacing up the cleats was 2018. And I finished with a championship, which I'm very grateful and blessed to say that I got to end my career on a high note. And following my playing career, I was in baseball and coaching, training, doing everything I possibly can to stay on a baseball field. And just recently made a pivot in my career to go outside of baseball, and just finished the interviewing, networking, recruiting process for the real world, and in corporate America, if you will, and just accepted a job to sell insurance, which checked a lot of boxes for me as far as what I was looking for, and we'll be beginning that next step in my life very shortly.
Well, obviously, I was aware of that process, and congratulations again. It was fun to watch you go through the process, and that probably is. We've got parents listening, we got players listening, we got coaches listening, and we talk all the time to these people about this journey of youth sports and how it prepares you for life. And it came up in your interviewing process. You and I were talking one day, and you kind of reminded me of the job interview. If I have to quote you, I think you said you were crushing the interview process, which didn't surprise me because you crushed the recruiting process. So can you kind of talk to our listeners a little bit about how maybe some of the things early in your career prepared you for that real life experience?
Yeah. So throughout the whole process of finding a job, I probably had 12 to 15 interviews, phone, in person, Zoom, all different sorts of things. And about 3 or 4 interviews in, They all went really well. And I started to realize I've done this before. This was exactly what I had experienced in the recruiting process for baseball, which really boils down to being comfortable talking to someone that's your superior, someone higher up on the food chain than you, being comfortable speaking with them, being comfortable talking about yourself, being comfortable asking them questions, even though you're the one that's being interviewed. That's something that was not, when I started getting recruited when I was 14 or 15 years old, did not come naturally to me at all. I mean, I'm talking to the the recruiting coordinator at Clemson. That's nerve wracking for a 15-year-old kid. You think that he's some crazy, superstar, which, a lot of the coaches are. That's why they're coaching at these huge schools. But at the end of the day, they're just baseball guys, just like I was. And throughout that process, I got comfortable in those situations, being able to be respectful and sound good on the phone, which we did trainings on. Everybody on our teams and in our organization did those trainings. I got to live with you, so I got the trainings every day. So from that experience of the baseball recruiting process, I was nervous going into these job interviews because I wasn't really sure what to expect. It was my first time experiencing that. And then I just caught stride and realized this is something that I've done a lot before and was good at. And that confidence just allowed me to be myself and be able to make a decision rather than just take whatever was thrown at me.
Yeah. Well, Christian, I'm famous for stories, and I have to almost apologize for this, but there's going to be stories in this talk that we're doing that just popped in my head. And you reminded me when the first phone call you ever did. I don't know if you remember. You were calling the ECU coach, Nick Schnabel, and who's now at Clemson. You mentioned Clemson, and I'll never forget. You said, "Hey, coach, this is Christian." That's how you started the conversation. And you were in ninth grade. And I remember sitting beside you. Now, my background in sales and marketing, I know that we need to work on that a little bit. But you made a point that, you jumped into that and you learned quickly. And I remember the second call you did much better than the first call. So for the parents listening out there, and you said something else, Christian, you weren't natural. This didn't come natural for you. Maybe some people it does, but a lot of people talking on the phone and presentations and interviews doesn't come natural, but you had the desire to learn it and get better at it. And that's a credit to you too. And you certainly did.
Yeah. Well, I think that, this is tailored to baseball athletes and coaches and parents, and development. When you hear the word development as baseball people, we think of improving your swing, getting faster, getting stronger, throwing faster, all that stuff. But when you break down development, it's all the same, whether you're developing as a salesman, whether you're developing as a husband or a wife or a baseball player, it's all the same. You have to be honest with yourself first, become aware of what your flaws are, and then actively take measures to improve those deficiencies that you have. That's what development is. You can't do it without first becoming aware of what you're not good at. Luckily, when I was making those phone calls as a kid, I had someone that was standing by me evaluating my deficiencies and telling me what those flaws were. And then it was my job to take the action to improve upon them. But that skill of developing on whatever you're doing is applicable long after baseball, but is incredibly necessary to reaching your potential as a baseball player too.
Well, again, you were coachable. Some people aren't coachable. Kids listening to this, there are people in your life that are around you. And we're about to start talking about some of your influences, Christian. That's our second point here. There are people, we say it takes a village. And these people, usually older people than the players, are trying to help these young players. They're giving them advice. And I can remember we went into a visit, and I said to you before the visit, you were in ninth grade. I said, Christian, when that coach asks you questions, I am not going to answer the questions. I'm not going to rescue you. I'm just going to sit there like a bump on the log. And you rose to the occasion. And I don't think it came natural or easy for you, but you did. But you were coachable. And that's a really, really important point as well. To
Well,
get better, you have to be coachable.
right, you're right. But you made a good point there. Of you made me do that. If I had it my way, I would have had you answer all the questions. And because you made me answer the questions, I got comfortable with that. And from being in travel baseball and amateur baseball, I see every single day a lot of parents don't let their kids do anything. They want to protect them. And I think that is an honorable characteristic. You want to protect your child and make sure that they're making the right decisions. But if you want them to develop certain skills and characteristics, they're going to have to fail. They're going to have to be very uncomfortable at times, which I certainly was, but it's not life or death. All you're having me do is answer a question from a college coach that's looking me in the eye rather than answering it for me. It was uncomfortable. I probably sometimes didn't say the perfect thing, but fast forward 15 years and now I'm incredibly comfortable in those situations because as a young kid I had to figure my way through it.
Yeah, and to the parents out there, and you mentioned I was squirming a little bit. I wasn't comfortable either. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was at ECU again. Billy Godwin was the head coach. I'll never forget it. He came up to me afterwards and said, "Wow, that might be the first time that I've ever had a kid answer all the questions and the parents not jump in." So I was proud of myself for doing that, but I was more proud of you because you did it. You did it right, and so we're already hitting on just some amazing teaching points here, Christian. But I want to switch gears for a minute and talk about this journey you went through. And we don't have time to think about all the people that were involved, but I'm sure you have some people that when you think back over your career were pretty influential people. Can you talk about some people that made an impact? And more importantly, why did they make an impact? What was the impact that they made on you?
Yeah, we could be here for 3 hours because I certainly had a lot of people that had huge influences on me. And I'm sure that I'm going to miss somebody. So I apologize to them if they listen to it and they think I'm leaving them out. But first things first, you and Mom, of course, Dad. I won't talk for long about that's what this whole conversation is. Dave Brisbane, who's my hitting coach from 13, maybe.
Coach B.
All the whole way through high school was an incredible influence on me and just teaching me how to play the game the right way, hustling, being a great teammate, and then becoming a good hitter as well. Tom Smith, my high school coach, who believed in me from day one of tryouts and gave me an opportunity to play varsity as a freshman, and just gave me every opportunity to fail and also succeed. And that just from a young age helped me build confidence to be able to go out and compete against older kids or, more experienced players. Fred Alberts was huge for me, helping, allowed me to play on his fall team, the Allegheny Pirates, with, again, older players that were better than me, more mature than me, and just giving me that experience of competing in that atmosphere and in front of a lot of college coaches. Tyke Steiner and Paul Esch, who own Core Sports Performance in Altoona, PA. I wouldn't be on this right now if it wasn't for those guys. I wouldn't be on this if it wasn't for any of these people. But I wasn't necessarily gifted physically with speed, explosiveness, agility. And we met with them when I was in 8th grade and formulated a plan to get my athleticism to where it needs to be. And they pushed me every single step of the way. And there's no chance I ever would have been able to play at the level that I was fortunate enough to play at without those guys. So just from my upbringing, those guys are huge. There, like I said, there's a ton of different people. The assistant coaches in high school, Coach Lowe, Coach Mancheri, my little league coach, Coach Conrad. They're all baseball guys, but there are a lot of people outside of baseball too that just helped me develop certain characteristics and attributes that allowed me to have success on the baseball field, and I think more importantly, overcome the failures as well.
Well, I can think back. I know all those people and so many other people that obviously we don't have time to mention everybody, but here's a point for the players out there. And again, Christian, a lot of this is going to sound like I'm just doting on you, but you did it the right way all the way through. You don't have a group of people like you just mentioned to help you unless you are a kid worthy and deserving of that help. Adults are not interested in helping cocky, arrogant, know-it-all kids. They're just not. So there's some kids that maybe feel like nobody's helping them. Sometimes you have to look in the mirror and say, why? And I want to make sure that the parents out there listening and the kids listening understand, you earn that level of help, by being respectful, by being coachable, by being teachable, by being humble. Those are the things, and you got a lot of this early on, but we want to share this kind of information with a lot of people. Those people, if they were on this podcast, would say the same thing. You were a kid they wanted to invest their time, their money, their energy into.
Yeah.
And that's a credit to you too.
I remembered one that I forgot. It's Rob Bruno.
Absolutely.
NorCal.
Yeah. He's our guest next week, by the way.
Oh, no way.
We'll be telling some stories next week for sure.
Yeah. Gave me an opportunity to play with an incredibly talented team, a couple big leaguers from that team when we were 14 years old, and was just incredibly helpful and honest throughout the recruiting process. And he's from California. We weren't face to face all the time, but gave me opportunities to play, gave me advice, and kind of started that us in the right direction in the recruiting process.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, great people around you, Christian. Let's switch gears. I want to talk about something that I don't know. I just don't hear it being talked about that much. And that's adversity. It's one of those things where you don't want to think about. Who wants to think about injuries? Who wants to think about getting cut from a team? Who wants to think about getting fired? Who wants to think about, all kinds of things that are keeping us from getting to where we want to go? And you certainly had a lot of adversity through your career. And I watched you overcome adversity after adversity after adversity. And I want you to just talk a little bit about maybe some specific examples if you want. It doesn't matter, but talk to us, the listeners, about overcoming adversity.
Yeah, adversity comes in all different shapes and sizes. Could be something personal, could be something family related, could be something injury related, performance related, all different types of things. So to give a couple examples of the type of adversity that I had, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm the only one that's ever experienced adversity. Every single Division I college professional baseball player experiences an extreme amount of adversity, and the ones that you watch on TV are the ones that made it through that adversity, and nobody does it on their own. I wouldn't have finished my career when I finished if it weren't for a strong support system around me that kind of kept me going. And that was big for me. So really, I'd say the first major adversity, and sometimes I do hesitate to call it major because, I heard a quote once said, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Right. So my adversity compared to the adversity of others is absolutely nothing. Like just a bump in the road, compared to people that are dealing with major health issues and it's a life or death situation. But at this point in my life, this was big adversity for me. I went to Ole Miss out of high school. I didn't play much my first half of my freshman year, and then I eventually earned a starting position and started the last 20 games or so, and started through the SEC tournament and the NCAA regional at NC State. Following my freshman year, and I had been dealing with some elbow issues and some knee issues, I went up and played summer ball in the Northwoods League in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and tore my UCL. So I had to get Tommy John. And once that it was confirmed, I was going to need surgery, and I was going to be out for a whole year. I received the news that I wouldn't be getting my scholarship money back, and ultimately, because of that, decided to not return to Ole Miss. Now, at the time, like everybody listening to this seems like, oh yeah, that's kind of normal. And it is very normal now. Transfer portal. This was pre-transfer portal. This happened all the time at Power 5 schools. There's these coaches have big salaries. They have to win or they lose their job. They lose the way that they make money for their family. I didn't really understand this at the time, and it rocked me pretty good. I didn't want to keep playing baseball. Like, I loved Ole Miss. I loved my teammates. I loved the push that I got from my coaches there. And that was kind of just taken away from me at the snap of a finger. And I didn't really, I'd say for a little bit, I didn't deal with it very well. I cried for a week, probably. But my parents, some other, supports in my life kind of talked me off the ledge of quitting baseball. And I really restarted the recruiting process there. So ultimately ended up deciding to go to Penn State. But what now, looking back, hindsight being 2020, that's one of the best things that's really ever happened to me, because of what I learned, because of the callus that you kind of form to adversity. When you're not used to adversity, the smallest thing can feel, like your world is ending. But once you go through something that rocks you, which I did, albeit not that serious in the grand scheme of life, but at the time for an 18-year-old, it was. I know that whatever happens, I'm going to be better off for it. Number one, that's really, really hard to understand when it hurts so bad. And number two, it's all going to work out. And wherever I end up, that's where I'm supposed to end up. And just to give you an example of how that was true in this situation, I transferred to Penn State, where my now wife went, where we kind of rekindled our relationship, and now I'm married to a wonderful person. And that's all because of what happened to me after my freshman year at Ole Miss. And I don't know what my life would look like right now if that didn't happen. So that wasn't the perspective I had at the time. It is the perspective I have now. And there was certainly more adversity through my baseball career in the form of injuries and lack of hitting. But that's just part of it. And it all depends on what you're focusing on and what your priorities are. If your priorities are hitting 350, then hitting 200 is the end of your world. If your priority is being a great hit or a great teammate in helping your team win, well, 200 still sucks, but there's other ways to enjoy your career and enjoy what you're able to be a part of.
As a parent, obviously that was excruciating to see our son, go through that. Again, there's parents listening. We had to let you go through that. And you did have a support system, Christian. But one of the things that stands out to me about that story is once you decided you wanted to play again, you went to a community college in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Bucks County Community College. You lived in the basement of a lady's house, took classes, and rehabbed all alone down there, all by yourself, while all your buddies were having the time of their lives playing it in the SEC. And I remember seeing
playing in Omaha.
And playing in Omaha. I remember us watching them on TV. So when we talk about, I get the point about adversity is all relative. We're talking about things that do pale in comparison to some people's adversity. But at that time, to do that at that young of an age, And this is the point, whatever the adversity is these people are facing, it's your adversity, and you have to find the way to get through it. It's going to be unique to you. But I remember, I just wanted to give you a kudos on that. That couldn't have been easy to do what you did down there all alone. So,
well, yeah, I didn't have any friends down there. I made one friend. My best friends were my trainers,
yeah.
Which I certainly spent a lot of time with, but it was just what I had to do. And you can sit around and lament about the situation you're in, or just understand that it's temporary, and you're doing it for a specific purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to switch gears again, Christian. I'm going to switch to something we call yeah buts. And for the parents and the players listening out there, in spite of all your success on the baseball field, I would say, and I think you would agree, you weren't a freakish like player. You didn't have gaudy numbers, like some of the top 20 kids in the country running 6'4", 60s. And yet you had enormous amount of success. When you were faced with things that somebody was telling you, you're too slow, your feet are too slow, your arm's not strong enough, your ball exit speed isn't every one of these kids out there, if they're getting people hearing them, telling them the truth, they're hearing about their yeah buts. And my experience is the kids that do something about their yeah buts, like you, keep playing. The kids that don't, their careers end sooner. Can you talk a little bit about some of the yeah buts, and again, how you overcame them? You mentioned Tyke and Paul. I remember them helping you a lot.
Yeah, my yeah buts were really my feet. Mm-hmm. Anything to do with my feet was a yeah but. My footwork in the infield, my lateral quickness, my first step quickness, my top end speed, 60-yard dash, that was all way too slow. And this was about when I was 14 or 15. I believe when I was 15, I ran a 7.560. That doesn't cut it for an infielder at the level that I wanted to play at, which was Division I Power 5 baseball. And a coach told us that, and told me that I wasn't going to be able to play at this particular school if I was running like this. And when he said that, I don't think he really believed that I think he was kind of writing me off of their recruiting board for that reason, not thinking that would ever change. And there's a kind of stigma around speed that everybody says, you are what you are kind of thing, which is not true now. That's how it used to be. I think everybody pretty much understands you can improve your speed now. And that's when we sought Tyke and Paul at Core Sports Performance, and put together a plan for developing my quickness. And we did a ton, every single workout, agility, and lateral movement, changing directions, first step quickness. Like, we didn't have 100-yard dashes that we'd run. I did that on my own, but we did everything that I really couldn't do on my own with Tyke and Paul. And it was incredible. A ton of plyometrics, just pure explosiveness type things. And then obviously running form and all that stuff. That's the type of training I was getting. So I did that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, really from 8th grade to my senior year of high school. And on probably starting around my freshman year of high school, Tuesdays and Thursdays, when the weather would permit it, I'd go to the track and I'd run. And I just made up my own workouts. I'd run a 10-yard dash, a 20-yard dash, 30, the whole way to 100 yards. Sometimes I'd run 10 100 yards. Sometimes I'd run 15 30-yard dashes. I did all sorts of stuff just to keep improving my fitness and ability to run. And I think what I learned from that, and what we're missing today in today's development, because there's so much information at your fingertips, YouTube, Google, blah, blah, blah. It just feels like there's so many quick fixes. There's nothing in your life that you can become an expert at without doing it an insane amount of times. like hitting. You can't get better at hitting doing 1 hour lesson a week. It's impossible. When you would be better off hitting for 30 minutes every single day by yourself, never getting the input of a hitting coach, than 1 hour a week. Your body just can't adjust and can't learn how to do it efficiently. And that's what I learned from running all the time. And ultimately turning my but not into a strength, but it wasn't a liability anymore, just because I did it all the time. And I literally learned which 60-yard dash was my fastest, and it was my third. I knew that because of how much I ran. I used to do my little warm up at the showcase, and then I'd run my 60.73. I'm like, what in the world? And so I started timing myself when I was running out at the football field. And my first one would be a 7.1. Second one would be a 6.9. Third one would be a 6.87. My third one was always my fastest. So when I went to a showcase, I would run 2 full 60s before my real one. And I guess to tell everybody where I ended up, I ran 7.5 when I was 15. When I was 18, I ran a 6.7.
So again, I want to make sure the listeners hear this loud and clear. Without you doing that, Christian, you do not get to do what you got to do. You don't play in the SEC. You don't play pro ball. But and make sure everybody understands when we say but, college coaches are looking at these young kids and they're saying, I like him, but, so in your case, I like that Christian Helsel kid, but his feet are too slow, but his 60 time just isn't going to cut it. And you took that information and did something about it and literally redirected the trajectory of your career. That's what's on the line here. And the problem with, you mentioned the, problem with lots of information, a lot of people aren't willing to get the information. I can remember the day you ran that 7.5. We got in the car and I said, Christian, I'll always be honest with you. You know that, running a 7.5 is not going to get you where you want to go. So you're going to either have to lower your standards or get a lot faster. And I'll never forget, you sat there with a grumpy face and you said, I'm not lowering my standards. And I said, okay, well, then you're going to have to get a lot faster. And you said, okay, how am I going to do that? And we put a plan together and you executed the plan. That's the point I want the listeners to hear, because I think it's a great example. And we've had lots of examples of kids who got that information, did something about it, changed their career. And so, there's a lot of kids who don't get the information, or they're not willing to hear the information, or if they do get the information, they don't do anything about it. They just stay the same. And if you stay the same, you're not going to get where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Lots of good stuff here, Christian. Your story, and we're going to wrap this up here as we wind down. You've had a long journey, and for the people listening, it's the start to the finish of a baseball career. We're literally covering T-ball to pro ball. And to put you on the spot, let's just talk about the whole journey, looking back over it now. Are there any life, if you were giving people advice now, start to finish, it's over, what could you tell them about your journey that might help them as they're going through their journey?
Well, I think adversity is a big thing, which we already talked about. That if I had to pick one thing, that is number one, but there are a couple that I would say are close seconds. When you look back on a career, you're either going to feel proud or you're going to feel regret. Sometimes maybe a mixture of both. I can confidently say there's not much that I regret. There are things that I wish I did different. Like I wish I invested a little more time in college in developing myself personally, like my swing mechanics, because I can look back now and see that there are flaws, but I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. And I wish I would have taken the time to know that. That's my only regret, or wish I'd done something different. What I am incredibly proud of is I was never scared of failure, in that I think that in life in general, a lot of people avoid giving their best effort because they're scared of failing. And failing when you don't give your best effort is easier than failing when you do give your best effort, because if you don't give your best effort, you can say, well, yeah, whatever, I didn't really care anyway. And that's no way to live your life. That's no way to go through a baseball career. And your baseball career is not going to be very long if you have that mentality. And I gave it every single thing I got. And I mean, my goal was to play in Omaha #1 and to play in the major leagues, to play in the big leagues. And I didn't achieve either of those. And just from looking at that fact, you might think that my career was a major failure. But based on the relationships I've formed, the experiences I've been fortunate enough to have, in some circumstances, the impact that I was able to make as a player on other people, and just the memories that I have, my career wasn't a failure; it was a massive success, because I wasn't scared to give it everything I have, and when you give it everything you have, you form amazing relationships, you form amazing memories, and that's something that nobody can ever take away from you. And as far as my effort and attitude and the way that how much I cared about it, I would never change one thing about any of that. I just wish my swing was a little better.
We're going to wrap this up, but you just reminded me of one other attribute that I think parents and players need to hear about, that you did really, really well throughout your career. And that was, you were comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'll give you a couple of the things that as a dad, I remember you going out to California to play with Rob Bruno as a 14-year-old. I put you on a plane and he picked you up. Some people think we're terrible parents for doing something like that. But I remember thinking, this is great experience for Christian. He has to go out there and be with people. I mean, we knew the people, but still, your parents weren't there. That's one. And I want you to just touch on that. And then one more. I remember the day you got called to pro ball, you got in a car, drove to Michigan, got a uniform, and got on a field in professional baseball with players you never even met. And I remember thinking, wow, you were prepared for that. Like you were able to assimilate into a culture quickly. Can you just touch on those couple things before we wrap up?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it comes back to self-confidence, and really what self-confidence is, it's believing and holding true to what you think is right, what you think you should be doing, regardless of what other people think. And when you have that self-confidence and you know that what you're doing is right, it doesn't really matter like what other people are saying or thinking. And I was put in a lot of uncomfortable positions from a young age, or at least situations that were uncomfortable for me. Being a freshman in high school on the varsity team with 18-year-olds, and you're 14 years old. But then going to college, and you're a freshman on the team, and there are 22-year-olds on the team in the same clubhouse, and now you're working together with them, talking to college coaches on the phone. That is really intimidating. Getting on a plane by myself at 14 or 15, going to pro ball, and there are guys in the locker room that have families and that don't speak English, and being able to work with them and on the same team, that's uncomfortable as well. But it all comes back to, are you confident enough to be yourself in that situation, or are you going to try to fit in with the crowd or do something different? And the best baseball players in the world are the ones that can be themselves no matter what the situation. And that just means that, like, if my MO and my brand of baseball is sprinting on and off the field and running a hard 90 every ground ball I hit, I'm not going to not do that if I'm on a freshman on the varsity team, because that's me. And I see so many kids that that they join a different team or they're playing with older players and they try to fit in with that crowd rather than just being themselves. And that causes an identity crisis. You lose confidence because you don't know who you are anymore, rather than just say, you know what, this is what I believe to be right, which is hustling, which is I'm not going to curse, which is standing up for the kid at lunch that there are bullies that are picking on, whatever it may be. You can either conform to the masses, or you can just be an individual and be yourself. And that is the best version of you that you can possibly have. And sometimes it's hard to stick with that, but that's what's necessary. And I think I learned that from a young age and was able to just I figured out who I was as a baseball player at a young age, and I was able to just stick with that.
Well, it obviously worked for you, Christian. And as your dad, I can't be prouder of you. I hope this I don't think this comes across as a dad doting on his son. I wanted to give credit where credit was due, but when I think back on this podcast, I just think about all the things that you talk about, that we talked about, that other people can apply. They haven't been through the journey that you've been through, and now you're giving them wisdom and experiences that could help them in their journey. And I greatly appreciate you taking your time to do that. So I just want to thank you, and we'll wrap it up here. But the first podcast is in the books, and it's going to be hard to ever top this one.
You'll get some good guys on that'll beat me.
We do have some characters coming on, but again, Christian, thank you so much for
being
here. All right. Take care.